It's beautiful, isn't it? The Will Turn Theater in Los Angeles, one of America's picture palaces, built in 1931 and reopened 54 years later in May of 1985. Hi, I'm Gene Kelly, and I want you to come with me back to a time when where we went to the movies was as important as the movies we went to see. It all began here in the early days of the century, in arcades where we looked through tiny windows onto a special world. What we saw transported us to other worlds, pictures that moved, lived, and we traveled outward to the stars, or inward to all those hidden places where we keep our own dreams. What we saw was unbelievable, amazing, strange, and exciting. It made us laugh and cry. It helped us celebrate the good times and forget the bad times. This was the magic of the movies. And every day, more and more people came to see this eighth wonder of the world. But take a look at where we went to the movies in those very early days. Narrow, small rooms called nickelodeons, because that's what it cost to get in, a nickel. A screen at one end, a projection and ticket booth at the other end. Bare walls and very uncomfortable seats. Something like the movie theaters of today. But even nickels add up. By 1917, Charlie Chaplin was making $1 million a year. The movies were becoming big business. And so the builders and the architects, men with a dream, with vision, began to build larger and grander theaters that by 1920 would bring millions of people to the movies. And studio heads like William Fox and Marcus Lowe, who helped pay for the early picture palaces, built even more extravagant theaters, trying to outdo each other in magnificent excess. These early theaters became in themselves major cultural events in both large and small cities. Everybody had to go to the movies to see the newest theater. The men who built these great theaters were themselves showmen. Sid Grauman, Balaban and Katz, William Fox, Roxy Rothafel, and as the movies got bigger and more spectacular, the theaters rivaled them in size and imagination. These theaters were, in scale and luxury, a fantasy come true. Many of them equaled the ornate and beautiful opera houses and concert halls of the 19th century. Actually, some of these early picture palaces were imitations of great European theaters, like the Paris Opera House. In 1919, New York proudly revealed the 5,000-seat Capitol, and in the decade between 1920 and 1930, more than 250 major movie theaters opened their doors to a public that just couldn't get enough of the movies. By 1930, 90 million Americans were going to the movies every week. Do you know what it used to cost to sit in a large, beautiful place like this for an afternoon or an evening just to watch movies? 65 cents. And for that 65 cents, you got not only the movie that you had waited weeks to see, you got music and live entertainment. From the moment we arrived to buy our tickets, there was a sense of something special, a feeling that it was an event, that once we stepped inside these picture palaces, we would be entering another world. A famous theater owner, Marcus Lowe, said, "We sell tickets to theaters, not movies." The marquees excited our sense of anticipation. The ticket booths, even the tickets themselves. The ushers, they were all like attendants at the court of some fabulous, legendary king. We waited for the show to begin in great, spacious areas surrounded by golden statues, flickering lamps, and gilded decorations. Ornate ceilings looked down on us from incredible heights, like the great cathedrals of Europe we'd only seen in pictures. We were, all at once, in ancient Egypt, in a Chinese palace, a Mayan temple, in a Persian garden, or in an underwater grotto. When it was time for the show to begin, We walked up wide staircases, holding onto the carved or gilded banisters which would have pleased the crowned heads of Europe. And when, finally, we entered the theater itself, we were already changed. We had left behind the everyday world, and we were ready for that special magic that was the movies. And the movies didn't just start. The lights dimmed, and in many of those wonderful theaters, the mighty Wurlitzer organ began to rise out of the darkness. Gaylord Carter began playing the organ in theaters in the 1920s and has been entertaining audiences for over 60 years.
The great movie palaces of the old days it was like going into a cathedral. The $1 Million Theater there at 3rd and Broadway it was like entering a great temple. But what was going on in there was pretty important too. Now, for instance, when I first went there in 1926, the feature picture was The Temptress with Greta Garbo. There was a 30-piece symphony orchestra in the pit playing the score of the picture and the overture. And then they would play the first 10 minutes of the last show at night, and I would finish the evening out with the rest of it. On the stage was Paul Whiteman with his marvelous jazz band, jazz orchestra, introducing the Rhapsody in Blue. There was a newsreel, a cartoon, and my organ solo was Roses of Picardy. Haven't played it since, and I don't know how I happened to play it then, but you got all of this for 35 cents if you got in before 6 p.m. The theater organ was developed so that when the organ came on and the orchestra went to take their rest, it didn't drop down and seem like you'd suddenly gone into a mortuary. What they did was increase the pressures in the pipes and give it a more vibrant sound. Then they added the traps and the percussions, tambourines, and the bells and the xylophones, and the drums to make it, to give it this orchestral effect. Now, I have this organ rigged up for that kind of thing, and here is some of the sound using these percussions and what we call the toy counter, which is the drums and tambourines and things. So that would be this. Music for the silent pictures had a very special kind of sound. For instance, a love scene sounded very much like this. Now, the name of that is Hearts and Flowers, and it was a famous, famous piece. In fact, it sort of identified itself with the early days of the silent movies. Now, the next important ingredient, and something that is in all movies, whether silent or sound, is the big chase. And that goes kind of like this. Now, I can go on like that indefinitely,